Welcome to Smash Fiction, where we pit two or more fictional characters against each other in a battle of strength, or wits, or poorly executed and unsustainable celebrity impressions, and see who would win. And yes, that will be the end of that voice, hopefully forever.
I liked it.
I support this decision, Dan.
Thanks.
It sounds
Motion
like
passes.
it sounds like Skeletor doing a Tim Curry impression.
Yeah.
Not because you're bad at it, just because it's already scaring me.
I love it.
Thanks, Bob. This week, Pennywise versus the Lord of Darkness versus Hexxus versus Long John Silver.
Will you listen to what you just said?
I refuse. I refuse to even look at what I'm saying right now.
Those words came out of your mouth.
Editor's note, this episode takes place after Smash Fiction episode 48, Wander vs. Cthulhu.
Oh my god, what?
It had been so long since their original fight that neither of them could really remember the fire that drove them to come to blows in the first place. Wander had braved the waves and the non-Euclidean geometry of that isolated place, following the light that his sword put forth in search of his cyclopean opponent, and Cthulhu, freshly risen from millennia of a death-like sleep, had seen this insignificant representative of the human race and its pathetic attempts to slay what could not be slain with the lowest of contempt. But all that was years ago. Once they had become locked together in the island of Rillier, they discovered their shared love of all things board games. And with those aquatic superheroes babysitting Cthulhu's many deep ones, game night at Rillier became a weekly occurrence that both Wander and Cthulhu looked forward to with giddy anticipation. They went through many games, of course. Risk, Catan, Battleship, Don't Wake Daddy.
Don't Wake Daddy is an especially thematic game for Cthulhu to be playing.
That is precisely why I put it in the list. Also, it's objectively a hilarious name for a game.
Yeah.
But the game that always held a special place in their hearts was the one that started it all, Clue. Once Wander learned that it wasn't, in fact, a game about trying to murder the other players, he found that he really took to the slow process of ferreting out hidden secrets. And while Cthulhu dominated their early games, Wander's skill advanced in leaps and bounds, and the two were delighted to find themselves equally matched.
Does anyone else hear Liz screaming somewhere in space?
In space, no one can hear you scream. Anyway.
Oh, that's true.
Thus it was that, on the anniversary of their first game night, Wander arrived in Cthulhu's den in Rillier only to find that, instead of the cleared floor space and stack of rectangular boxes that he'd come to expect on such evenings, Cthulhu had instead set up a couch and a TV, with two very different sized buckets of popcorn waiting to be dug into. Cthulhu explained that he'd had a VHS copy of the film Clue sitting around gathering dust for ages now, but he had taken the time to dig it up so they could enjoy this 1980s take on their favorite activity. Wander had already seen the film, but he enjoyed the farcical elements enough that he was happy to spend the evening watching it with his friend. Cthulhu, however, never known for being kind, had neglected to rewind the VHS after his last viewing. The first scene to pop up after his giant clawed finger hit the play button was the dinner scene toward the beginning of the movie. Years of spending time with Cthulhu meant that Wander's sanity was harder to shake than most, but even he was taken aback at the sight before him. There were all the characters he was used to seeing in the film Clue, of course: Christopher Lloyd as Professor Plum, Madeline Kahn as Mrs. White, Tim Curry as Wadsworth the Butler, and so on. But who were these four other people sitting at the table enjoying their bowls of monkey brain soup? Cthulhu noticed his friend's confusion. Oh, I see. You know how the movie Clue, when it was released originally, had 3 different endings that would change depending on which movie theater you saw it in? Well, there was a very special version of the film, the Rillier cut, I believe it's called, that introduced entirely new characters right from the beginning.
Hashtag release the Rillier cut.
That giant red-skinned demon is the Lord of Darkness. The smoke monster in between Colonel Mustard and Miss Scarlet is Hexxus. The creepy-looking clown ogling Yvette is Pennywise. And the one-legged pirate seated across the table from Mr. Body is Long John Silver. Cthulhu's facial tentacles twitched in eagerness as he started remembering the bizarre side plot at the heart of the Rillier cut. Those 4 new guests actually arrived at the mansion before the other 6 guests did. In an earlier scene, Wadsworth the Butler explained to them that they're all being blackmailed, and that the only way for them to get out scot-free is to kill the other 6 guests after they've arrived. Wadsworth stresses that they have to be sneaky about it, though. If any of the other guests get too suspicious of them, they're toast. By this point, Wander's eyes are the size and shape of saucers as he looks between Cthulhu's face and the screen. But which one of these 4 sexy-voiced supervillains ends up surreptitiously murdering the Clue crew and getting away with it? Cthulhu, of course, was a good host and didn't want to spoil the ending of his favorite movie for his best friend. I, however, am not nearly as considerate. I'm Dan Mulcairn, and I'm going to be revealing the end of the Rouillet cut of Clue after listening to some arguing from a real colorful collection of co-hosts. Advocating for Hexxus from Ferngully is Viscountess Keylime, better known as Kit Mulcairn.
Cheese pizza. Has nothing to do with Hexxus. I just wanted to say that.
Advocating for Pennywise from It is Comrade Mauve, better known as Miles Schneiderman.
I'm Miles, the bullshitting clown. You are morons. So now we know each other.
That was so good, Miles.
That was way better than mine.
So freaking. No, I was like, oh god, that was a good Tim Curry doing a Northeastern accent.
Oh, thank you. I wasn't entirely sure about doing like just an entire quote from the movie as my intro, but we've already pretty much we're pretty much down here together in the mud already.
Yeah,
we're all floating down here for sure.
As you all know, I'm sure we all quote down here. So
very good. Advocating for the Lord of Darkness from Legend is Pope Mellow Yellow, better known as Megan Bob.
I require the solace of the shadows in the dark of AO3. G-rated fic is my destroyer!
Oh, it's beautiful.
And advocating for Long John Silver from Muppet Treasure Island is Senator Citrine, better known as Claire Mulcairn.
Smoke, men, ghost, clowns, and a guy who looks like Satan. Don't worry about me. I am just a cook who looks like Tim Curry.
Yes!
In order to determine who goes first this week, I tasked the advocates with taking the place of their respective characters in their respective movies to see who would do the best job pulling off their villainous schemes.
Oh no.
Megan Bob, tasked with destroying the fantasy world of Legend, quickly became distracted by Jake and Lily's chaste flirting in the early part of the movie and started whispering lewd suggestions to them from the bushes. They actually went along with her commands, meaning that they were too distracted to see the 2 unicorns when they arrived. Bob wasn't, however, and immediately went to go pet the 2 magical horses, which of course, per the rules of the movie Legend, resulted in an apocalyptic storm that ended up tearing the world apart. So well done, Bob.
How dare you suggest that film has rules?
Is that what happened?
No, I destroyed
There's
the
like
world.
2 rules. One of them involves a person touching a unicorn, so... Miles was tasked with terrorizing the children of a small New England town in the 1960s. He began to stalk the children, glowering at them from sewer grates or from the shadows of trees. And when no adults were nearby, he would whisper to them, "Your generation's rapacity and staggering population size will reshape the economic and sociological landscape of our country in ways that will prove unsustainable and largely damaging in the long term."
You did a Miles impression!
Dan, do you want to just tell me where the cameras in my house are now, or do you want to wait until later?
It's like I've known you for decades. Not a lot of screaming and death from this approach, but Bill Denborough and the other members of the Losers Club did feel a creeping sense of shame as they aged, so points, I guess.
As well they should.
Kit wasn't keen on the idea of destroying an Australian rainforest, so she instead decided to focus on Hexxus's goal of getting revenge on the fairies of Ferngully. She decided to hide the Walkman from the movie at the base of the tree and arranged for it to play "If I'm Gonna Eat Somebody, It Might As Well Be You," the worst song from the Ferngully soundtrack, on a constant loop.
And that's saying something.
Yeah. Not only were the fairies annoyed by this psychic torment, they also found that a large number of them started developing a sexual fetish for the idea of being eaten. I can't say that introducing the fairies of Ferngully to Vor is necessarily in line with Hexxus's goals, but it's certainly an impressive feat. And finally, Claire set out to murder her way to Captain Flint's buried treasure, but ended up getting cabin fever 5 minutes into the voyage. Thankfully, she'll have plenty of time to try and break away from that conga line before she needs to give her opening arguments, because the order will be Bob, then Miles, then Kit, then Claire. Megan Bob, could the murderer be the Lord of Darkness in the throne room with the large collection of goth ladies' clothing?
Let's start with the name. Lord of Darkness, not the head supervisor in charge of darkness, or the district regional manager of darkness, not the mayor of Darknessville. He is the Lord of Darkness. Now, is this figurative or literal darkness? It's both, because if you'll notice, at the beginning of the film, he is slightly in shadows. And you can only see him because he's got glow-in-the-dark contacts. What is this dark magic? Literal darkness magic. I mean, we don't see him control it or anything, but there is no other answer I will accept than that he controls darkness, because that room is basically one giant orgy of fireplaces. The correct collective noun for fireplaces or fireplacei. And he is still shrouded in darkness. He can move unseen in any part of the house he happens to be in, which will mean superior stealth and more opportunities to get the jump on victims or on these other Tims. He can shoot fireballs, which we see him do multiple times in what I'm sure Ridley Scott thought was the climax of the film. How will this look during this fancy party weekend? Like this. Oh no, the fireplace suddenly exploded a bit and killed a guest. Well, we'll have to get Gerald, the humble chimbley sweep, to come take a look at that. Clearly just this dusty old house playing tricks. No one is going to suspect that these fires are from him. Why would they? People can't shoot fire out of their fingers, can they? This Minotaur can. But, and credit to the scriptwriter, the idea that a Minotaur has pyromancy is actually the least weird thing about this film. But it is a thing in this film that he can definitely do.
There's a Minotaur with pyromancy? What? When?
I think she's referring to the Lord of Darkness as a Minotaur.
Oh.
I mean, that's kind of what he is.
Okay, I'm
All right.
sorry. I was really confused and thought I watched a different movie.
Best part, it causes area damage when he does it. You don't have to be a precision shooter to set the rest of the room on fire and just kill someone from smoke damage, which is a thing that absolutely happened in the days when people lived in manor houses. Stuff burning was just a part of life. It's an old house. Stuff probably catches fire all the time. He travels through mirrors. Do you even know how many mirrors are in this house? There is nothing rich, fancy people love more than a reflective surface. They probably have mirrors in the pantry, in the mudroom, in the treasure parlor. If he can walk through a mirror to get to Lily, he can walk through a mirror to kill some guest. If the fire, for some reason, isn't an option, or we're worried about property damage, he fights Jack with a sword in the film, and he hits so hard with it that the sword causes sparks. Where will he get swords? Above any fireplace in this place, or from the sword closet, which this rich house will have. I know about the 1% in their sword closets. And will he get away with the many murders he's going to commit? Because he's easily the least suspicious person at this party. If you wrongly think he's suspicious, I offer sworn testimony from one of the housekeepers. And I quote, "Why, he's as quiet as a mouse. Very unassuming for such a big lad. I didn't even see him lurking in that great big chair by the fire. It's almost like he's made of shadows. Well, and then I was dusting in the pantry and he appeared right behind me as I was dusting oranges. There I was dusting away when I catch sight of him in the mirror. It's like he traveled through the mirror and into the pantry. Although it does sound mad now I say it, mirrors in the pantry. But I suppose that's what folk like, mirrors. Although now I come to think of it, he also snuck out of the shadows when that big blast came from the chimney. I'd been having the devil's own time trying to start a fire for everyone to enjoy in the treasure parlor, and then whoomph, up it went in a blaze. He just smiled at me and mumbled he'd always been good with fire. Nothing suspicious in that, I say, especially if it means we don't have to call Gerald to come out. He lives clear the other side of the village. Anyway, that's all to say that Mr. Darkness has been one of the easiest guests we've ever had in this manor. He never asked us to tidy his room and he wiped his hooves before he came inside. These others now, they've been a pack of trouble from dawn till dusk. Mr. Silver's been nipping at the brandy and his lobsters left a stench we'll never be rid of. Mr. Hexxus tracked slime everywhere, a messier house guest I've never seen. It's easy to know which room he's been in, I can tell you. Mr. Pennywise is mostly fine, but you know, I never did trust clowns. Only a mad person would trust clowns. No, officer, if you're looking for suspects, I think he's the one who did it. I mean, all those poor, charred, stabbed people. It's the sort of thing a clown would do, frankly. Freshly dusted orange, officer.
How the fuck am I supposed to rebut that?
What, the testimony of this very sane, normal person that I brought? Who is not me?
Is that the end of your opener, Bob?
Yes, I mean, and my life, but yes.
I'd like to thank you. I've been searching for a long time to discover the overlap in the Venn diagram between the 1% and me as a college student, and possessing a sword closet is apparently that overlap, so thank you.
Also, y'all are white.
Also that. Miles, was it Pennywise in the sewer with the balloons?
Guys, before I start my argument, I have a confession to make. You remember about 2 years ago, during the fall of 2017, when we did Gracie Hart versus Derek Zoolander?
Oh, was that 2 years ago?
Oh my
You remember how
God.
utterly lopsided that match was?
Yeah.
And then do you remember about 2 years before that, during the fall of 2015, when we did Brock Sampson versus Sterling Archer, and how that also turned out to be a total mismatch? So, here's the thing. I took a trip to Maine a while back. And now it turns out that every 2 years, for no explainable reason, I gain the ability to see and prey upon all your worst fears. And since we all know that there's nothing more important to anyone here than this podcast, it turns out that all your worst fears involve representing a character that has no chance to win their Smash Fiction match. I'm really sorry, guys. It's on me. I shouldn't have given into this power. It was so tempting. But since this is fall of 2019 and it's happening again, 2 years later, probably for the last time, I just figured I'd come clean and explain how exactly it came to be that you all ended up in a match where you have to murder people, and you're all representing characters who we've never actually seen murder people. That's my bad, guys. Pennywise the Dancing Clown, on the other hand, most assuredly fucking murders people. Sometimes it dismembers them and leaves them to bleed to death. Sometimes it hypnotizes them with strange alien lights and drags them into a pipe. Sometimes it stabs them while taking the form of a giant spider, which is just a thing it does every once in a while. Its ability to kill people is miles above and beyond anyone else in this match, though, again, when everyone else in this match consists of what if the devil was an incel, Nickelodeon's GAC, but with less FDA approval.
Fuck yeah.
And Pirate Dad.
Oh, I love Pirate Dad!
It's not difficult to drive that point home. Y'all are from kids' movies, and I guess in the case of Legend, baby's first acid trip. Pennywise is, in its own words, eternal, the eater of worlds, who takes the form of the thing you fear most simply because your feeble human mind is incapable of processing its true horror. It is ironically the only character here not clowning around. Here's the thing about...
Sorry, I was like, I could hear Dan deducting points.
Here's the thing about Pennywise. It is a real physical monster that can actually kill you, but also manipulates your perception and fills your head with intensely detailed illusions, making it impossible for you to know what's real and what isn't. It's basically like, what if Freddy Krueger could also kill you while you're awake? And while Pennywise feeds on fear, it's not limited to conjuring images of things you're afraid of. During the adult storyline of the 1990 miniseries, Pennywise tricks Ben into thinking that Beverly has fallen for him, something that Ben desires rather than fears. The fact that Pennywise can do this using the words of the poem Ben wrote for Bev as children speaks to the fact that it can read the minds of its victims and use pretty much anything in their heads against them. And remember, the victims in this match are people with a metric shit ton of baggage in their brains. There are going to be so many things for Pennywise to play with, especially since each one of them is here because they are being blackmailed, aka because they are afraid of something. Come to think of it, just curious, how exactly is Pennywise in this match? Because it's only been known to appear in the town of Derry, Maine, and it's shown to have something of a hard time leaving its home in the sewers. It also once convinced adult Beverly that an entire house was something it wasn't, so if you have a better explanation, I'm here for it, but I'm pretty sure this mansion is actually in Maine, the only state where scary things ever happen, as we all know, and is probably some dilapidated house with easy sewer access instead of the generous accommodations that we think is here. Thanks to the Clue Crew's natural inclination to split up, it should be easy to draw them down into the sewers one by one, especially with the help of Pennywise's hypnotic deadlights, which can instantly entrance you, instantly kill you, or instantly both. You might think you're wandering around a big house with a power outage, Colonel Mustard, but you're actually walking straight into the hot dog of your doom. Or, if that's too hard or takes too much time, I guess Pennywise could also just trick the characters from Clue into killing each other. That's what it did to Henry Bowers, and Henry was just a pretend murderer. The Clue folks are actual murderers. If Pennywise doesn't care about producing a satisfying meal for itself and just wants to wrap shit up quick, it will be absurdly easy for it to create situations for that to happen. You make them hear some weird noises, they go check it out. One of the other Clue people is in the next room, but oh shit, they look like the cook who knows all your secrets. There's a candlestick in your hand, boom. Repeat 6 times, get back to dairy in time for a late supper of children who taste much better. Whatever the method Pennywise decides to use, there will ultimately be only one answer to this mystery. Pennywise the Dancing Clown, with the overpowered supernatural abilities, down here, where you're all floating.
And I just want to encourage all of our listeners to pick up Miles's new solo album, Hot Dog of Doom, available in stores now. Kit, could it have been Hexxus in the leveler with the toxic love?
So let me get this straight. The premise of this match is to murder a bunch of humans who don't trust each other without being noticed? And you thought inviting the primordial poison monster was fair? The very first thing Hexxus will do is leach into the dirtiest parts of this house, consuming every last delicious bit of coal and ash, tobacco and alcohol, cleaning chemicals and car fluids, you get the idea. You've invited Hexxus to a banquet of toxic delights created by the most skilled chefs of pollutant cuisine, shitty humans. So let's see. Now that Hexxus is just stuffed, where to go? How to kill an entire dinner party without being suspected? Well, it's probably old hat by now, but I do love the classics. Let's poison the meal! Easy enough to do as Hexxus can schlorp and waft his way through any nook and cranny, sneak a bit of his poisons into that disgusting monkey-brained entree. Mrs. Peacock takes the most bites, as it is her favorite meal, and that's at least one down right there. Even if the other guests don't eat enough to die, they all ate a bit, and they're all feeling ill. But now they know someone poisoned the meal. When they storm into the kitchen to find the cook, they'll come upon her horrific, charred corpse. My, it looks as though a terrible grease fire accident has occurred. Unable to question the cook, they go in search of the lovely maid Yvette. Wadsworth leads them to the billiards room where she has been setting up the secret recording device. However, the door is locked, and Yvette is not answering them. Little do they know, Hexxus has flooded that room with carbon monoxide, and Yvette will never be opening that door again. Wadsworth decides to continue the plans of the evening, leading his guests back to the study. Once there, they come upon the body of Mr. Body, lying dead on the ground in a pile of his own vomit. Externally, he appears untouched, and because Professor Plum is a shit doctor, they are unable to tell that Body died from severe alcohol poisoning when Hexxus forced deadly amounts of the concentrated alcohol into his system. As far as the guests know, Body also succumbed to the poisoned dinner, so With guests panicking and demanding answers, Wadsworth explains the reason the guests were gathered here. Blackmail, of course, and that the entry door has been locked since Body arrived. The killer is somewhere in the locked house, clearly, so the guests ultimately make the brilliant decision to search the home, but only after making the very stupid decision to split up. Way to make it even easier for the amorphous, toxin-horny embodiment of pollution to pick them off without a witness in sight. Though I focused on some of the myriad ways Hexxus could kill humans quickly and quietly, he is fully capable of backhanding a human's head right the fuck off. In Ferngully, he causes physical damage to objects he strikes with his hand while in his smoky form, and when he is defeated in Ferngully, it's because a fucking fairy put a magic bean in his chest, and all the fucking fairies use their fucking fairy magic bullshit to trap him in a tree again. The humans of Ferngully didn't do shit, and the humans of Clue won't do shit either. Except die. Mysteriously.
Very well done, Team Hexxus. That was a lovely, terrifying, awful story you knit for us. Claire, was it possibly Long John Silver on the island with a pack of murderous Muppets?
Yeah!
Oh, I don't mean to alarm you, dear judge, but I hear there's many a dark-hearted character in this match. Demon smoke monsters, demon clowns, and just plain demons. Wish it weren't true, but these are dark times we live in. The party guests in this match will be able to tell, just by looking at them, that they are inhuman creatures that aren't to be trusted. Now, my fellow advocates have been feeding you all sorts of tall tales about their character's capacity for guile, but I know you won't be taken in by any of their flattery, so you won't. You're a clever lad. Bright as a button you are. That's why I am pleased to tell you that the fellow I'm representing here today, Long John Silver, is a right upstanding citizen. Certainly not the silver-tongued murderer that some people say he is. Not that it's been easy for Long John. He's had to overcome his fair share of unfounded prejudice. When Billy Bones is living at the inn where Jim Hawkins works, about half his lines are spent telling Jim Hawkins over and over again that there's a one-legged man who's after him, a bloodthirsty killer. So if you meet a one-legged man, it's bound to be this fellow, so no matter what you do not trust him, for the one-legged man brings death. Jim Hawkins tells him, sure, I will not trust any one-legged men that I happen to meet. Then, when Billy Bones hears that this one-legged man is coming for him, unfortunately, he dies of a heart attack from the sheer terror of it, God rest his soul. I don't know who this one-legged monster was that he was so afraid of, but his reputation is so bad that when someone learned he was after them, they died of fright. Good thing we don't have any characters like that in this match. If we did, the rest of the competition wouldn't stand a chance. Anyway, when Jim and his companions finally meet our dear friend Long John, they eye his missing leg suspiciously, remembering the words of Billy Bones. Long John says, "Oh, that? Lost that timber-fighting brigands off Madagascar under Admiral Hawk." He then quickly pivots into telling a joke that leaves Jim and his friends laughing, after which he says, "Oh, you're a fine pair of lads." And with that, all suspicion that Jim has of Long John instantly evaporates. The one warning that Billy Bones gave him about the one person that they have to fear has been discarded. And rightly so. Ain't nothing nefarious about old Long John. Some claim that Long John was spinning a story to avoid suspicion and using humor and flattery to deflect blame. But I'd say that sort of high-level social kung fu seems like an awful lot for a simple cook to manage. Later, Long John, purely by accident, causes Jim to reveal during their conversation the location of Billy Bones' treasure map, locked up in a safe that only the first mate, Mr. Arrow, has the keys to. And wouldn't you know it, shortly after that, Mr. Arrow ends up overboard, lost at sea. But surely Long John had nothing to do with that. He simply went up to Mr. Arrow one night and said, "Wicked fog tonight, sir. Reminds me of the night we ran aground off the Pampas. Half the crew drowned in leaky lifeboats. Ah, it were a terrible shame. It's a common occurrence, sir. Little-used piece of equipment falls into disrepair. I'm not saying our lifeboats are unsafe, sir. I'm not saying we got problems." As you might imagine, Mr. Arrow then decides to get in a lifeboat to test its seaworthiness, and wouldn't you know it, he ends up drifting off into the ocean. But fortunately for everyone, before he got in the boat, Long John Silver took his hat and his keys for safekeeping. Now, some people might say Long John murdered Mr. Arrow. Some people might say, in doing so, Long John Silver unlocked the much-coveted achievement from the video game It Man of killing your target using nothing but reverse psychology. But come on, that doesn't make any kind of sense at all. After all, what kind of scoundrel would make an extended argument to get what they want by using nothing but reverse psychology? Why, such a person would be a truly heartless knave. Fortunately, even after Long John was exposed for being a pirate, allegedly, and even after Jim came to believe that Long John was responsible for killing Mr. Arrow, through appealing to Jim's good nature, Long John Silver was able to regain the trust of Jim multiple times throughout the movie. Now, some say he was only doing this so that he could, like Lucy, pulling the football away from Charlie Brown, then re-betray Jim over and over again so that he could do stuff like use him as a hostage. But I think we both know that a fine fellow like Long John Silver would never do such a thing to his dear old pal Jim. Long John is such a likable and charismatic fellow that even after his crew finds that the eponymous treasure of Treasure Island isn't there, and they mutiny against him, tie him up and prepare to kill him, he is able to, in just a few sentences, convince them into untying him, begging for his forgiveness, and once again swearing their undying loyalty to him. Now, some say that this was because he was such a master of psychology that he was able to socially judo flip his would-be killers into becoming his servants. But that sounds a little far-fetched, don't you think? If that were true, it would mean that Long John Silver, a bloody cook on a movie where most of the cast is puppets, was a more efficient murderer with better social manipulation skills than not just any of the characters in this match, but pretty much any other character in the history of this here podcast. And that couldn't possibly be true. Could it?
No, you couldn't.
Now there's an informed opinion.
Oh.
What a spicy curry of openers we've heard so far. But I hope you've saved room, because now we are moving on to extra spicy rebuttals. So Megan Bob is on the chopping block first, so everyone bring some heat for the Lord of Darkness.
I just think, Bob, I understand the point made by your witness.
Thank you.
But the thing is I think that the Lord of Darkness, like, of all these characters, he's the one that I think best fits the profile of Fall Guy.
I agree.
Because not only does he straight up look like the devil, but he's also ridiculously easy to manipulate. What Lily does in that movie, you know, people do that in movies all the time. Characters do that to villains and, like, trick them and turn on them at the end. But usually it's, like, dressed up a little more than that.
He's basically got Jafar syndrome.
Let me ask you a question. How bad do you think he wants to fuck your character? That's my question about how you think that's going to work out. He wanted Lily because she's a sexy princess.
Jumping off of what Miles said, your dude is thirsty, and there are more than one woman, and hey, there's also a gay dude, so there's that. I don't know which way he swings, but he likes the pretty people. There's a few pretty people.
Man, it's like you guys didn't watch the movie. Like, he likes...
I unfortunately watched the movie.
I watched every minute of that movie. How dare you?
He likes Lily because she's so fucking pure. Like, he wants to wreck that because he's a monster. He's a terrible person, guys.
He's bound by all sorts of weird, like, magic laws and shit. Like, there's some unicorns, but he can't go do it himself, so he sends all his inept minions because he can't just, like, touch the unicorns or whatever. When a guy comes at him with a sword, suddenly there's, like, a portal to space behind him, and he gets pulled out of it. Like, it just feels like when he's in the same room as people who are actively trying to kill them, he should just be able to, like, I'm the Lord of Darkness, and, like, shoot fire at them and kill them. But he never does anything. He, like, doesn't seem to have powers, or, like, I just don't know what he can do and what he can't, but it seems to be very little. So...
Okay, I want to say, I think he's been down there for a really long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think he's just real bored. I think he wants a challenge. I think what you're seeing is an animal that needs more stimulation. You know, you need to put, like, a pumpkin with some people inside of it that he can, like, bat at to get them out. That's the problem.
Well, with that mental image firmly in mind, next up, defending his sweet beloved clown is Miles. I do just want to remind everyone that we do not allow inhalers full of battery acid into Smash Fiction rebuttals.
That's right.
Not after last time.
Pennywise really sucks at closing the deal. He frequently shows up to scare people, but he seems to be, like, either bad at killing them, or he, like, for some reason, something about his powers is he can't just kill people in straightforward ways. He has to do it in weird ways. I get that you're going to say, oh, it's because he wants him to taste better. But in this case, he's just, like, trying to kill him, so he's not going to deal with all that. But this guy is so in love with his own dumb, gimmicky shtick. You can tell, like, he's not going to be able to resist, like, playing with his food and letting them get away and all of that nonsense. Like, he gets beaten by these guys twice when they actually try to fight him. When people fight back, I just don't think when he really needs to, he can switch into the killer mode the way you're saying he can.
I mean, you kind of rebutted that for me. You can brush it off and say, like, well, he clearly relishes whatever, but it's canonically established the reason he doesn't kill the kids and instead spends so much time scaring them is so they will be more afraid, because that makes them taste better. If you want to make the argument that he clearly enjoys it, then sure, I guess, but we never see him in the movie actively trying to, like, snuff people out just because they're in his way. He's trying to eat them. He wants them to be afraid. That is his MO. And as far as the kids being able to take him down multiple times, that is also a matter of their camaraderie and their faith in one another is the reason they are able to do that, as is part of the, you know, the theme of the film. And I don't think that's happening here, because the Clue people all hate each other.
Miles, I'm not going to argue with you that these people are not going to band together to take you out, like, permanently. Yeah. No way. No way. But we do see that it can be injured, and when it is injured, it retreats. It's actually vulnerable to whatever weaknesses the form it takes has.
Yeah, but in order to injure it, you have to understand that, and you have to be aware it takes the form of whatever I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of this werewolf, therefore I can hurt it with silver. You have to be able to make that connection and make those leaps of logic in order to do what it takes to hurt it. And I don't think that's going to happen. Again, with these characters, frankly, as shitty as some of the kids in the miniseries are, like, they have nothing on the characters from Clue.
I just want to say you're really brightly dressed. You're going to be very easy to notice in corners.
Compared to the Lord of Darkness.
Hey, shadows! Shadows!
Maybe if, like, he couldn't cloud people's minds and make them see what he wants them to see, that would be true. We do know that Pennywise's reality warping powers, like, extend outward into the real world. They're not just in your head. Like, there's that scene where all the kids are holding hands in a circle, and all of a sudden Pennywise is in the circle holding their hands, and he's just, like, there, and he grabs Stan and, like, carries him away. So any kind of, like, sort of appearance or sight-based arguments, I don't think that's going to be a problem for a shapeshifter and reality warper.
It's still a rude thing to wear to a dinner party.
And now we come to Kit. Advocates, I suggest you not waste your time suggesting that Hexxus is not the best part of that movie, because it's just not going to work.
Yep. Okay.
I mean,
Hexxus really likes humans, actually. I don't know that he's going to want to hurt any, because he loves the trash that they make. You're like their pet. Like, they feed you garbage.
Hexxus murdered the shit out of, like, all the humans that lived in the Australian rainforest back in the day. He's just also willing to use them. If, like, the goal of this match is to kill these, like, however so many humans that are in this house, and he gets to slurp up and eat all that, like, fucking nasty garbage that they make, fine. Fucking kill him. There's 7 billion people. He can just digest all of their trash from. Like, it's fine. It's fine.
Hexxus only ever tries to kill directly one person in the movie, and it's Batty the Bat, and he fails. He can't kill goddamn Batty the Bat.
He had other plans. He wanted to fucking stick it to those stupid-ass little fairies and destroy their beautiful rainforest. Who gives a shit about Batty? He's got a goal in mind here, and there's no fucking fairies to stop him.
I really loved your argument, Kit. I really enjoyed it, I just want to say. I'm not sure that it's supported by the text of the film. Because you were kind of talking about Hexxus using all these different strategies to, you know, make all these different materials, like, form specific pollutants for specific tasks. And, like, it'd be super cool if he could do that, but A, if that's what he's doing, it's not mentioned in the script of the film. And B, he's not that subtle. You're painting a beautiful picture of him sneaking around the house and doing things all clandestinely, when I think what's actually going to happen is he's going to start singing a fucking Disney villain song, and then as soon as the first person notices him, he's going to become a giant flaming sludge skeleton and start monologuing.
Oh my god, okay. First of all, he's going to sing his song in the hour before everyone shows up, all right? Second of all, what did you want me to do? There's so little in that movie because there's so many stupid bad songs. Like, there's very little Tim Curry in that. What do you want me to do? Freaking just have Hexxus possess the car in the garage? Because then that's basically Christine. That's a different match. I mean, he's not going to be talking to people. Like, the point in Fern Gully was he wanted to destroy a rainforest. That's not a thing he wanted to do subtly. This is a match about subtly killing people, which is very easy to do with toxins. Sorry, the movie doesn't give me that. What do you want?
No, I know. I'm not. I just wanted to say I recognize that you have little to work with, and I think you did a wonderful job working with it. I just, unfortunately, I don't know how much is there underneath.
And finally, we come to Claire. I'm sure she's shivering in her timbers.
Oh. This house is full of treasure. Like, there's no way there's not a bunch of shit that Long John wants to take. And in your very monologue, you made the point that he is all about getting his way. I don't think he's going to stick around and actually follow through on the job. I think he's going to take the treasure and run.
I mean, Long John does enjoy treasure. He also does seem to enjoy murdering people and getting away with it. Like, he's having the time of his life when he tricks Mr. Arrow into, like, getting set out to sea and stuff like that. So that is his other pastime. And, like, if all of you are able to argue that oh, we can not be obsessed with our other weird shticks like seducing people or scaring people or whatever, then certainly Long John Silver cannot like be stealing treasure all the time. And you know what? He could kill people and then steal treasure off their bodies. He could take their wallets and shit. You know
what? I'm satisfied.
I didn't hear a whole lot about how he's gonna kill people. There's no boats, and I'm unsure as to what his methods are gonna be, and like, the only methods I can think of for him to use make it really obvious that the pirate did it. Like, if he stabs somebody with a sword or hangs them with a noose, I think it's gonna be pretty clear who the culprit is.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right, Miles. I'm sure that throughout all of his time as a pirate, if you listen to that opening argument, what you should know is he's a very respectable fellow. I'm sure his reputation for killing many, many people is completely unearned.
With what is what I'm asking?
What? The candlestick, the rope, the knife, the gun, whatever the fuck is around. We know he knows how to use a sword. We know he knows how to use guns. He could choke someone with a rope because he's a friggin' pirate. Like, he can use all of this stuff that's in the house. And the idea that a pirate doesn't have the skills, like a feared, notorious pirate, doesn't have the skills to close the deal and kill someone. The only reason we don't see him killing more people is because it's a Muppet movie. But, like, implied in his backstory, he's killed plenty of people.
I will give you that because he's a human, he's definitely going to be able to blend into this party better than the fucking Lord of Darkness.
How dare you?
But his murder tactics are so obvious. It's so clear as an audience member. Like, the only reason he gets away with all the things he does is because everyone on the ship is so fucking stupid. Whether they be the good guys or the bad guys, the only reason his fucking crew forgives him after they mutiny is because they're fucking idiots. They're Muppets, and these Clue people are smarter than Muppets, damn it.
Unlike the literal children and fairies and fucking caveman Tom Cruise, who are like all just the most brilliant combatants that you've had to go up against. I would argue that if you are trying to judge intelligence level by like complexity of thought expressed by the dialogue, I think that this Muppet movie actually has some of the most intelligent characters in it. Like, Kermit is super smart in that movie, and like a lot of the dialogue is just lifted right out of Treasure Island. The characters are just as smart as the characters from Treasure Island. Underneath all the shtick, they just also do weird shtick because they're Muppets.
Well, the choppiness of a 35-year-old VHS tape stored in substandard conditions can't get in the way of what's become quite obvious at this point. These four baritone-voiced villains are extremely good at offing people. The guest list at Mr. Body's mansion is dwindling fast, but that just means that the survivors are getting all the more paranoid. The guests all draw lots to go investigate different parts of the mansion, and as luck would have it, our four characters end up being put in the same group, the one assigned to explore the cellar. Their exploration of the house's cellar is extremely perfunctory, of course. All four of them know who the murderer is, or in this case, who the murderers are, and are just using this time away from the other guests to plot yet more murder. That is until one of the villains stumbles upon a strange wooden box tucked away in a forgotten corner of the basement. He brings it over to a dusty table, and the other three gather round. As they start to open the lid, a faint rumble can be heard somewhere. Could this be the lightning round?
Yes.
The box opens up to reveal that it is, in fact, a board game, but one that looks like it's already in progress if the small figurines standing partway along the winding paths are any indication.
Fuck me.
On a whim, Long John Silver picks up the two six-sided dice lying on the board and gives them a toss. One of the pieces begins to crawl forward along the path. Once it stops, a jeweled dome at the center of the game board glows slightly, as letters seem to swirl up from its depths. All the while, the rumbling sound that the villains initially took to be thunder grows louder, and they realize that it is, in fact, the rhythmic beating of drums. Back on the couch, Wander looks agape at the TV, not for the first time that night. Wait a minute, I've seen this movie too! Are you telling me that in the Relier cut of Clue, these extra party guests somehow come across a copy of the board game Jumanji? Cthulhu waves a hand impatiently at his tiny companion. You're missing the best part. Long John Silver just inadvertently summoned a huge horde of jungle animals that start stampeding through the mansion. You see that guy in the loincloth with the big beard there? That's Simi. You're gonna love him. He's a real cut-up. He was a kid who found Jumanji years ago, but then got sucked into the jungle within the game. He's explaining that in order to escape the game and put everything back to normal, the villains are going to have to play all the way through until one of them gets to the center of the board and yells out Jumanji. And let me tell you, this is where the movie gets really wild. Advocates, you've accidentally let loose a whole stampede of destruction and now have to deal with it. And what's more, you have to do so together. Choose one of the many horrors of Jumanji and paint me a word picture showing how your character deals with it. So this is slightly surprise party-ish at this point.
You know, Dan, I had a feeling that the lightning round was going to involve another Tim Curry property.
Is Jumanji Tim Curry?
Yeah, man, he was in the animated series. He did a voice in the animated series. Was that not intentional?
That was unintentional. I just went with another board game.
Wow. Okay.
That's how reflexively good I am at this show. Like, it just happens. So anyway, each of you needs to choose a Jumanji threat and then craft a lightning round argument talking about how you defeat it. So I have a list of the stuff that shows up in the movie. The threats are bats, mosquitoes, monkeys, lions, carnivorous plants.
I want that one.
The hunter Van Pelt, a stampede of rhinos, a stampede of rhinos, elephants, zebras, and pelicans. Your character is transformed into an ape, a monsoon, crocodiles, quicksand, spiders, or an earthquake. As always, in the lightning round, we go backwards from what we were doing before. So Claire's going to be starting us off and telling us a little jungly story about Long John Silver.
Okay, so I think that the problem that Long John Silver is going to have to address is the stampede. There are dozens of animals that are running all around Body Manor, I guess, is what it's called. He decides he needs to get this stampede under control before it takes the whole house down. Unfortunately, / possibly fortunately, Long John Silver has also been transformed into a monkey at this point in time. Now, this has some advantages and some disadvantages. The advantage is that he can actually swing around and kind of get on one of the rhinos towards the front of the pack pretty easily. The animals kind of see him as one of his own a little bit. So he starts talking to them and being like, oh boy, man, I sure hate stampeding, don't you guys? And then just like, he can like kind of duck over to the back of the group and go like, oh yeah, me too. And then like run over to the other side and be like, oh, why do we do this all the time? And then just like run over and be like, yeah, it's so terrible. And then he's going to start a song about how he wants to direct the stampede, and he's going to like lead the stampede down a better path. And it's to the tune of Professional Pirate, which is his one song in Muppet Treasure Island, but it's called Processional Pilot.
Yes!
And basically it's going to end with him leading the procession into the kitchen where they're all going to like settle down. And he's going to make them not want to stampede anymore because that monkey Long John Silver's going to cook them all a big meal. And as you've seen what happens to Rizzo after he eats a bunch of Long John Silver's cooking, they get comically engorged bellies and just pass out on the ground.
How is there not a fan cut of Jumanji where they replace all the animals with Muppets?
Oh. Seriously.
All right, very good. Kit, what is Hexxus dealing with and how does he do so?
It's the end of the Clue movie. You know, the scene where they're like all standing in the lobby, the foyer, right? Except all the humans are dead. It's basically just Wadsworth with the other Curry villains. They're having a fucking argument about some villain nonsense. Then they hear like this weird sound coming from upstairs. And they look up and water is rushing down. And there's actually like rain beginning to fall from the ceiling. Like, what the fuck? So this flood comes blasting through the foyer. It gets swept up in it. It was fucking floating down into a storm drain and fucks off for another 30 years. And then...
You don't tell me what to do.
I'm just saying what happens, man. Long John's fine because he like grabs onto one of the doors that like came off of its hinges and just pirates his little way into the city and probably goes on Muppet adventures there. Who cares? I don't really know what happens to Lord of Darkness. It's like a very long scene that's cinematically beautiful but has no substance, and I couldn't follow it. But Hexxus, he gets washed away in this rain as well. And at first it's like, and he goes into the city and it's terrible. And then he realizes he's sweeping over the streets. There's so much delicious pollution out here. Guys, this is amazing. Forget the rainforest. I could have been in a city this whole time. He winds up mingling with the city pollution because of this amazing monsoon. And eventually time passes. People don't really think about all the curries anymore until the rain comes. The wonderful acid rain! And Hexxus is back and he destroys this whole town.
that was lovely. Miles, I know that it is kind of a long movie, but I do think it would have been made better if there was a scene where Pennywise fights a lion. So let's hear something along those lines, perhaps.
All right, so Van Pelt is doing his thing all over this mansion. A guy like this, easy prey for Pennywise. Pennywise is like making him see various animals skittering around that he can track. He makes him see Alan Parrish a few times, which he just like really hates that fucking kid. So like he just goes after him. And, all with the greater plan, of course, of leading Van Pelt down into the basement of the house so that Pennywise can eat him. So Van Pelt gets down into the basement, chasing all these random animals, falling right into Pennywise's trap. And Pennywise reveals itself. And of course, the clown is sort of the default form for children, because obviously all children are scared of clowns. The default form that Pennywise takes for adults is a little bit different, and he tries that one out first. A DVD copy of It, but without Tim Curry.
Oh, no!
It's just like the most terrifying thing anyone can imagine is having to watch that movie without Tim Curry in it.
Oh, man.
And, that's good. Like, Van Pelt is clearly terrified, and that tastes pretty good, but we can do more. So Pennywise reaches deeper into Van Pelt's mind, pulls out the Grim Reaper, like the death guy from the Jumanji animated series. I think it's called the Stalker.
Man, you know way more about the animated series than I do, man.
I also have the internet.
Yeah.
But yes, I did watch that show. Van Pelt is terrified of this death figure from the cartoon, and he's cowering, and that's so good. That's so good. His fear is so tasty. But you know what? We can get even more. Pennywise can get a little bit greedy, like Claire mentioned earlier, sometimes, when he's not in a rush. So he digs even deeper, and he finds something buried in the recesses of Van Pelt's mind. He's like, what's this? That's weird. I mean, all right, I guess. I don't know why this is going to work, but sure. Turns grinning to Van Pelt, and he says, "Hey there, Van Pelt. You want a balloon?" And Van Pelt freezes, and they stare at each other for a moment. Van Pelt reaches out to slowly take the balloon.
What are we doing?
There's a new emotion coming off of him that Pennywise doesn't recognize.
Again?
Van Pelt proceeds to explain to him that the only way somebody like him becomes such an asshole, such like a killer be killed, master of the hunt, toxic masculinity piece of shit, is with some really fucked up parenting. And when he was a kid, all he wanted was balloons. He loved balloons. But his dad told him that it wasn't becoming of a young boy to be walking around with balloons in his hands, and he popped all of them. And now here's Pennywise. Van Pelt's a grown man. Pennywise is offering him what he's always wanted, that thing, that one desire from his childhood. And he just says, I feel like I can take this balloon now. Thank you. And Pennywise starts to realize that the emotion that he's tasting all of a sudden is not fear, but acceptance and closure. And it's something he's never tasted before because he always went after children who are frankly too young to be dealing with that kind of thing for the most part. It's so much richer and more fulfilling than anything he had ever fed on before. Pennywise had no idea that this flavor of emotion existed. And so he says, no, thank you. And then they hug. Aww. And they cry and they go their separate ways, each having taught the other something truly valuable about themselves.
Yay! Wow. Hugo Award!
And now Bob's gonna blow that shit out of the water.
Speaking of Hugo Awards, Bob, let's hear what the Lord of Darkness is up to. I would also like to warn him, those one-horned animals that came stampeding out of the board are not unicorns. Just letting him know.
By the way, Claire, I know that you thought I was going for them fucking right there, which I guess you are the horny one after all.
I just know that tone that someone gets in their voice on Smash Fiction. They say, and then suddenly they stop and they look at each other. And I'm like, oh, sorry, I know this.
All the Pavlovian training I've done on you people has worked. So it's bats, and they're just flying towards his face. And then what happens? We get a flashback to baby Lord of Darkness. Why are my horns so big, Dad? They're really big, like cumbersomely, awkwardly big, like unnecessarily enormous. And Satan wraps a fiery arm around his shoulder and says, son, you'll know why. Someday the moment will come and you'll know why. And we flash back to the current moment. Bats are streaming past his face. They're not hitting him because, they're streaming past because they're not stupid. Bats don't hit people when they fly. But he holds up his hand. He says, friends of the night, of the darkness, I am your lord. And the bats pause because they're like, oh, okay, well, we'll listen. And he feels alive for the first time. Like this is what life is meant to be. Because before this, his aesthetic felt like a put on, sort of performance, not really grounded in anything. But these bats are the key to achieving new levels of goth insanity. Perch! Perch upon me, small fiends of the night! And the bats sort of go, okay, what the fuck? I mean, that's fine. I'm tired of flapping, I guess. So they perch all across his enormous shoulders, forming a cape of bats, a cloak of bats, and they form a cowl that covers his head, and they hang from those enormous horns that he'd always hated having, resented, and they rest their little wings, and they take little tiny bat naps, and as the weight of these sleeping bats settles over him, and they find a place to rest, he feels the most goth he has ever felt in his whole life. So goth that dead Lord Byron has a boner. And you think that's where the story ends, but it isn't. Because now that he is completely covered with this cape of bats, he can he can go outside. He can face the daylight, and he can finally see unicorns in their natural habitat. And as he sees the unicorns in their natural habitat, he'd always felt resentment. And then he was like, oh, you also have this frankly very cumbersome horn on your head as well. And maybe the world is wide enough for all of us things with frankly unnecessary appendages on our head to feel kinship with one another. And then a Tangerine Dream song starts playing. And now the Lord of Darkness is a little bit of a horse boy, which is the other version of like horse girl. He has a trapper keeper with a unicorn on it now is what I'm trying to say.
Well, we are now at the part of the movie where Wadsworth the butler is sprinting from one end of the mansion to the other as he puts together exactly what happened. So I'm going to go and see how this movie ends, and then I will report back and let you know which one of you has been revealed as the murderer.
Miles, I was not expecting you to go in a soft direction too, but I'm glad we both did that.
You know what, Bob? We're doing a podcast together. I think you're rubbing off on me a little bit.
I'm like pumice upon you. I'm softening you.
That's right.
Can we all just agree, though, that the best film is Muppet Treasure Island? Like, just by mile.
Oh, yeah.
It's the greatest
Absolutely.
thing humanity has ever done. I was watching it for maybe the 20th, 30th time in my life. And that Hans Zimmer score started up and my soul started vibrating in my body because I feel that strongly that it is, frankly, a masterpiece.
Yeah.
That was actually, unfortunately, the one movie I didn't get to watch for this match.
I still, get on my Amazon and go watch it anyway, because it's just watch it again.
Yeah, well, I mean, so here's the thing. I didn't watch any Muppets shit ever in my life. I've never seen anything Muppets related except for Muppet Treasure Island, which I watched 200 times as a kid. So I didn't actually.
So good.
Yeah, I didn't actually need to watch it again because I remember everything about that movie.
But you should still experience it again because it's like, oh god, it's like drugs.
I will.
And also, one thing I like about it a lot is I think that Tim Curry's performance as Long John Silver in that could pretty much be lifted out of that movie and put in an actual Treasure Island movie.
Yeah.
And like,
Pretty
it would have
much.
just been fine. Like, he maybe like hams it up a tiny bit more because of the Muppets, but not really. Like, he's just really good and like a really good Long John Silver in that movie. So,
I mean, his performance in it is transcendent. It's not a great movie, but he is incredible.
I think he's the best part of like all of these movies.
Yes. Hands down.
Yeah,
don't,
for sure.
I don't know that any of the other parts of Legend are worth talking about.
They're worth talking about, but not like admirably.
Yeah.
Legend is the one thing I might push back on him being the best part of.
Yeah.
Why?
Because
What's better?
I think they're all tied for last.
I did enjoy Tom Cruise's weird, like, hairy legs in that movie. He's one of the few, like, fantasy heroes who wears, like, no pants. He just has, like, I guess little shorts or a loincloth, because his, like, upper
Very
body's
tiny
all
shorts.
armor, and then his just, like, weird hairy legs are uncovered all the
He's
time.
He-Manning it up for sure.
I guess, yeah.
That movie, I had very strong feelings about that movie as a child. I mean, because it had unicorns in it. And that's literally the only thing I paid attention to in that film. I remember thinking there weren't enough unicorns in it. Like, that was my chief complaint. But I didn't remember how insane it was.
It's bonkers.
That script changed its mind several times.
Yeah, Legend makes no sense and is just like completely fucking bananas. And I had no idea what was going on in the film.
It feels like there was some weird writing exercise where, like, they were given all of these costumes and, like, sets or something, and somebody had, like, half an hour to write a script that used all of it. They weren't allowed to, like, look back or edit anything, and then they just, like, handed it in at the end, and it was, like...
It was like 4 people got together and they were like, all right, I brought this character and this character and this character.
That's
all right, well, I
interesting.
brought this goal and this MacGuffin.
It felt like Ridley Scott wanted to make a movie that, like, a kid could enjoy and was like, okay, Dark Crystal was cool. It wasn't.
Yeah.
But that's what I feel like that's what he was trying to go for.
Yeah, or, like, Neverending Story, I think.
Yeah, both awful things to try and emulate.
Let's have a moment then also to talk about Ferngully.
Ferngully.
How much
I have so many thoughts.
Oh my God.
I watched that movie so many times when I was a kid, and it doesn't
enjoyed
hold
it.
up.
It doesn't hold up, but I was surprised at the fact that it held up a little better than I feared it might hold up.
I was disappointed by how bad it was, considering that I liked it so much. And, like, I knew that some amazing actors were in it that I'm pretty sure they blew their entire budget getting. Like, Tim Curry and Robin Williams were fantastic, but they could not save that movie.
No, those lines they had were insane.
The weird thing is this was like a total passion project for Robin Williams, actually. Lindsay Ellis has a really good video about it, but he really believed in this because he liked the message of it and stuff like that.
Yeah, I
And
saw that.
It was funny because he was doing this at the same time as Aladdin, and for him, this was like the good passion project he cared about, and then Aladdin was like the soulless cash grab in his mind.
Yeah.
And then, like, in terms of how they've been remembered, you know, like,
You know, I don't know. I don't know if he's wrong, though. I feel like Ferngully means what it says a lot. Like, to the point that it destroys itself.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a scene in Ferngully that still hit me as hard as it hit me when I was a kid. And that's the scene where the camera pans over the trees that will have the red X's on them.
yeah.
And I thought that was the only scene that had a really strong tone and did the job it was trying to do.
Oh, you didn't think the bat rap had a really strong tone?
I mean,
Boy, that
what's
rap.
the tone? What tone was that supposed to be?
Yeah, I was having a conversation with Miles about this the other day, but Don Bluth doesn't know what songs are for in a musical. He, like, the purpose of songs I have discovered in a musical is either for a character to be able to, like, express their inner thoughts, or as a way of signifying an important change in the narrative. Like, you know, the Prince Ali song is like, Aladdin's a prince now, you know what I mean? Like, or like Reflection is like Mulan expressing her inner thoughts. And his are just like weird little cul-de-sacs of shtick.
This lizard wants to eat you.
Right.
Yeah.
The lizard has not been mentioned before the song, and then once the song is over, the lizard vanishes from the film, never mentioned again.
Just to
It's
set the record
like,
straight, Don Bluth had nothing to do with Ferngully.
oh, did he not?
No.
Oh, I assumed. How is that possible? This is like Don.
I can absolutely see where you would make that mistake, because, like, the animation is, like, sub-Bluth, like, sub-Bakshi, to be quite honest. But
Yeah,
yes.
it was like Disney, but like 40% worse and like 60% hornier. So I just assumed it was
it's
Don
like-
Bluth.
It's like bargain basement Disney. Last thing I want to say about Ferngully is that it is one of 3 films, I believe, to star both Christian Slater and Samantha Mathis.
Yes.
The other 2 are the unappreciated classic Pump Up the Volume,
Okay.
which if you guys have never seen Pump Up the Volume, it's very good.
All right.
And the third one is the 1996 action thriller Broken Arrow,
There you go.
which I am someone who never ever watches action movies because I don't like them. I love the shit out of Broken Arrow.
That was one of the first movies you ever showed me, Miles, back when we were first becoming friends.
I'm saying,
Is it your courtship dance for
I
friends?
guess so, man.
yeah, it almost kind of like resonates with this whole Tim Curry thing because like Broken Arrow is like any other action movie except that Travolta is in it and it's like peak Travolta and he just steals every fucking scene that he's in and makes the movie watchable. Anyway, sorry, just had to put up a Broken Arrow real quick.
Can I ask one question? Is Jim Hawkins kind of a Disney princess? Not in the sense that he's actually a Disney princess, but he goes through the I Want song
He
and all
does
that
talk
stuff.
to animals.
Is he a Disney princess?
He's got some long flowing locks for sure. And
I
a
don't
nice
think he
little
has parents that
soprano
are in the
voice.
picture. Yeah, dead dad. Yeah, grows up like poor scrubbing floors, has animal friends and dreams of adventure. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
it fits, absolutely.
Disney princess Jim Hawkins.
Yeah. Anyway,
All right.
we need to end this episode.
Hi, Dan.
disagree. This episode should keep on going forever.
Before I get to my judgment, I did want to share that as Kit and I were watching it, we were kind of mystified by the weird quasi-New York accent that Tim Curry was putting on for his role.
Right. Because I specifically asked Dan, like, where does this take place? And Dan was like, Maine. And I'm just like, is that a Maine accent?
It certainly didn't sound like any Maine accent I had ever heard.
Right.
So we started joking that it would be great if there was a version of the movie that existed where Pennywise's lines were dubbed over with a very thick backwoods Maine accent instead.
You know.
Something a little more regionally appropriate.
You know, like the kind that Hub does.
Yes, the kind that Hub, host of Tighten Up the Defense, does. So I mentioned this to him on Twitter, and what should arrive in my email inbox but a
so
few
excited.
minutes later, but Hub giving a dramatic reading of some of Pennywise's most iconic lines, which we would like to share with all of you right now. So thank you to Hub for that.
Oh, yeah. They float, Georgie. They float. And when you're down here with me, I suppose you float, too. Yeah?
Oh my god.
Oh, that's tremendous.
Okay.
So yeah, if there was any doubt lingering that man is a national treasure, let that be dispelled right now.
Let that be put to rest.
Thank you so much, Hub. Like,
What do we even say about how great Hub is? Like, what are the words that exist for that?
There's none. There's just none.
I think the words are as follows. Y'all should go listen to Tighten Up the Defense.
For sure. All right, so moving on to what I was thinking. We've said before on the show that some of the hardest decisions to come to are ones where the match is not about like, okay, well, whichever character's stronger is going to win, or like whichever character's faster is going to win, you know, where the characters are not direct analogs of each other, and also where the goal is like relatively open-ended, things get really tricky. And then like that trickiness gets exponentially increased when there's 4 characters in a really complex situation. You know, I was convinced that any one of these characters could do the thing that was set before me. Like, I think all of you guys legitimately put forth some very convincing arguments about why, yes, even you, Bob, why what your characters brought to the table would be helpful given the circumstances and what their goals were. And so that was really what, like, the vast majority of my time was spent pondering. What do I think is the most likely way that this is all going to go? I'm not going to get into, like, my deep blow-by-blow of this match. What I will say is, after a lot of deliberation, I think the character who has the abilities, the opportunity, and the mindset to most likely pull out a win on this is Pennywise. And so that's what I'm going to go with on this one.
Okay.
Nice.
But really terrific job all of you on this. It was really, really tricky for me to come to a conclusion. But yeah, you all did fantastic, and you should feel very proud of yourselves.
Nice job, guys.
Yeah,
Thanks.
good job, Miles.
Congrats.
I did not anticipate being that terrified of losing to Long John Silver, but I totally was.
I thought it was just going to be a joke, but then when I started watching this movie, I'm like, holy shit, I think he could do it. Like,
Yeah.
I
Dude,
thought it was just,
I
I didn't think he was going to be a contender at all. But then I was watching it, and like, he's really freaking good at manipulating people.
I came out of my rebuttal feeling pretty good, and I was feeling pretty good, and then we got to yours, and your rebuttals happened, and I was like, fuck. But I'm very glad to have eked out the win on this one.
Guys, you're all great.
Yeah.
Tom, Fo, the kid, thanks. No pollution here, just love. Over to Twitter. Actually, that is kind of pollution, isn't it? Thank you to Changing Shades, the Tighten Up the Defense pod, Cool Down Now, Andrew Young, JTFJ3, The Rose the Jake, NZ Waffles, Cosplay Devotee, CJ, Jeffrick Present, Icon Jade, Alexander, aka Ducko, very cute, Florian, M. Bond, Earth Mofo, Sid Rabbit Blog, and the best animated shows ever so far podcast. Over to Tumbles, thank you to Secretly a Skeleton, Sid Rabbit Blog, Ink the Cryptid, and Fat Blunt 69.
Fat Blunt 69.
Oh.
And over to Facebook, thank you to Jeff Polier, the Tighten Up the Defense pod, Jeffrey Ketchum, Adam Mayo, and Robert Ramsey.
And thanks also to Simmy, aka Christopher Simmerman Jr., our featured patron this particular episode, who took the role of Robin Williams in this unexpected Jumanji cameo, transformed into a wild jungle lad who, I guess, wipes himself with banana leaves. I'm sorry, I'm struggling to remember some Robin Williams lines from Jumanji. But
What year is it?
Simmy, of course, was swept off into the wild and magical land of Jumanji because of his patronage of ours over at patreon.com/SmashFicPodcast, as all of our patrons do, inevitably. It may not be Jumanji, but a magical land awaits them somewhere out there in the multiverse. And we should also say that this episode was created thanks to the votes of some of those very patrons. This month, we decided to do something a little different. We sent them a poll with 5 different matches on there, each of which involved a 4-way match between 4 characters, all played by the same actor. And I guess you guys just love Tim Curry, because that was the one that came away with the win. And now this episode exists, so you're welcome. This has been Cagemas in September, I guess.
Yay!
Dan, would you say it's been Curryismas in September?
It has been Curryismas in September.
There you go. You gotta get it right.
I don't think there's a way to get it right. There's no... Rightness has no place in that sentence.
Don't Curry be happy?
Oh my god, okay.
No, the podcast is over.
Yep, this match is over. So join us next week for Surprise Party. Smash Fiction is produced by Miles Schneiderman and production assistant Sharon Schneiderman, with logo design by Claire Mulcairn.
Special thanks to Kevin MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod at Incompetech.com for our theme song, Hitman.
You can find us on Twitter at SmashFicPodcast and search for the Smash Fiction Podcast on Facebook, Tumblr, and YouTube.
Subscribe on Apple Podcasts or your podcatcher of choice, and if you leave us a good review, we shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
Smash Fiction is made possible thanks to our supporters on Patreon at patreon.com/smashfictionpodcast. Please consider donating as little as $1 each month. It helps us keep the show going, and we have great rewards and extra content for those who help us out.
If you have any suggestions, feedback, or other contributions, send them to us at smashfictionpodcast@gmail.com and help us continue the fight.
And using humor to And using humor. Oh, that's the problem. And using humor. How do you do that without the H?
It's hard.
You brought this on yourself.
Oh, I certainly did.
I require the solace. Wait, what is it? Sorry. Shut the fuck up.
Now some say that this was because he is such a master of psychology that he was able to socially judo flip his would-be killers into become... Sorry, you do hit the R's because it's a pirate accent. It's just... but the rest of it's Cockney. It's like Cockney, but then the R's